4 names: Julius Caesar, Cleopatra, Mark Antony, Octavian. Together, they didn't just live history. They destroyed a republic and built an empire. This is not 4 separate stories. This is one chain reaction. A world where power meant betrayal. Love became politics. Friendship became war. And one decision could change the fate of millions. It began with Julius Caesar, a brilliant general, a master of ambition. The man who rose so high that Rome itself feared him. He conquered nations, broke traditions, and stood above every rival, until the Senate decided one man had become too powerful. And on the Ides of March, they struck. But Caesar's death did not bring peace, because waiting in the shadows was Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, intelligent, ruthless, magnetic. She understood something many Romans did not. Power is never empty for long, and whoever controls Rome controls the world. Then came Mark Antony, war hero, loyal ally, dangerous lover. He had Caesar's name behind him, and Cleopatra at his side. Together they looked unstoppable, but Rome had another player, younger, colder, smarter, Octavian, the adopted son of Caesar. He did not need to shout. He did not need to charm. He only needed to win. And when the dust settled, the Republic was dead, and Augustus, first emperor of Rome, stood alone. This is the story of ambition, of war, of betrayal, of 4 people who reshaped the ancient world forever. And it all begins now. They kidnapped him. He laughed. They threatened him. He promised to come back and kill them all. And he did. But that wasn't the moment Julius Caesar changed history. The real moment came later, at a small river where one decision would start a war and end a republic. Julius Caesar wasn't supposed to become the most powerful man in Rome. He wasn't the richest. He wasn't the most respected. And at the beginning, he wasn't even the most feared. But he understood something most men didn't. Power isn't given, it's taken. As a young man, Caesar was already different. While others followed tradition, he broke it. While others stayed safe, he took risks. And sometimes, those risks nearly killed him. At one point, he was captured by pirates. They demanded a ransom, 20 talents of silver. Caesar laughed. He told them they were asking for too little. He was worth at least 50. So they raised the price. While he was their prisoner, he didn't act like one. He gave orders, wrote speeches, even mocked his captors. And he made them a promise. "When I am free, I will come back and kill you all." They laughed. They thought he was joking. He wasn't. After his release, Caesar raised a fleet, hunted them down, and had every single one of them executed, exactly as he said he would. That was the first glimpse of who he really was. Years later, Rome was no longer stable. Corruption, power struggles, ambition everywhere. And Caesar saw an opportunity. He built alliances, gained influence, and eventually, he was given command of an army. That's when everything changed. In Gaul, Caesar didn't just fight, he dominated, battle after battle, victory after victory. He didn't just win wars, he built a legend. His soldiers didn't just follow him, they believed in him. And that made him dangerous. Very dangerous. Back in Rome, The Senate was watching. They feared him. They knew what happened when a general became too powerful. So they gave him an order. Return to Rome. Without his army. It was a trap, because the moment he obeyed, he would lose everything. His power, his protection, maybe even his life. And that's when he stood there, at the edge of a small river, the Rubicon. By law, no general was allowed to cross it with an army. If they did, it meant one thing: war. Caesar knew exactly what it meant. If he crossed, there was no going back, no forgiveness, no second chances, only war against Rome itself. For a moment, he hesitated. This was the line, the point of no return, the decision that would define him forever. Then, he stepped forward and crossed the river. Alea iacta est. The die is cast. With that single step, Caesar declared war on Rome, and Rome was not ready. What followed was chaos, civil war. Allies turned into enemies. The Republic began to collapse under its own weight. And Caesar, he kept winning. Again, and again, and again. Until there was no one left to stop him. He returned to Rome, not as a general, but as something far more dangerous, a ruler. He was declared dictator, not for a year, not for 10, for life. And that's when everything changed, again. Because Rome was not built for kings. The same men who once feared him now feared something worse, that he would never give up power, that the Republic was already dead. So they made a decision. If Caesar wouldn't step down, they would remove him forever. March 15th, the Ides of March, the Senate chamber. Caesar walked in, unarmed, confident, untouchable. He was wrong. They surrounded him, not enemies, friends, allies, men he trusted. The first blade struck, then another, 23 times. And in that moment, the most powerful man in Rome fell to the ground. Even you, Brutus. But here's the truth most people don't realize. Killing Caesar didn't save the Republic. It destroyed it. Because after his death, Rome didn't return to normal. It fell deeper into chaos. More war, more blood, more power struggles. Until one man rose and finished what Caesar started. The Republic was gone, and in its place, an empire. Julius Caesar didn't just change Rome. He ended one world and created another. And this is only the beginning of his story. The year 48 BC. A young woman is rolled up inside a carpet and smuggled into the royal palace of Alexandria. On the other side of that carpet waits Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in the known world. She was 21 years old. He was 52. It was her only card to play, and it worked. But this is not a love story. It is the story of a woman who dominated the most powerful men in Rome and came close to destroying the empire before it even existed. She was probably not what you imagine. Coins from the era show her with a prominent nose and strong jaw. Modern historians believe her appearance was completely normal for a Greco-Macedonian woman of the 1st century BC. Cleopatra did not conquer Rome with her face. She did it with something far more dangerous, her mind. She was the first ruler of her dynasty, the Ptolemies, who bothered to learn Egyptian. Her ancestors had spent 250 years governing Egypt without speaking the language of their people. Cleopatra spoke 9 languages. She was not a queen. She was a world-class negotiator in an era when women were not supposed to have an opinion. She was born in 69 BC in Alexandria, the richest and most intellectual city in the ancient world. Her father was Ptolemy XII, a weak and corrupt king who bought his throne from Rome through debt. Cleopatra grew up knowing 2 things: that her family depended on Rome to survive, and that she was the only one in her family with the real ability to govern. At 18, she was already co-governing alongside her father. At 21, her 10-year-old brother expelled her from the throne with the help of his advisors. That was the greatest mistake in the history of Egypt. Expelled from the throne, and with her brother sending assassins to eliminate her, Cleopatra made a decision. She needed to speak to Caesar, and Caesar was in his palace, surrounded by her brother's guards. So she had herself rolled up inside a carpet. Some texts say it was a linen sack, and it was delivered as a gift to the Roman general. When the carpet unrolled, Caesar found himself face to face with a young woman, disheveled, probably covered in dust, who looked him in the eyes and began speaking in perfect Latin. Caesar had spent decades conquering the world, and in that moment, it was he who was conquered. Their relationship was, from the very first day, both political and personal. Caesar reinstated her on the throne. Cleopatra gave him something Rome desperately needed: the grain of Egypt, the greatest food source in the Mediterranean. He stayed with her 9 months in Alexandria, 9 months in which they sailed together along the Nile, while Rome waited for its general to return and govern. When Caesar left, Cleopatra was pregnant with Caesarion, the son of the most powerful man in the world. But here is the question no one asks. Why did Caesar, with all the power in the world, not simply turn Egypt into a Roman province? The answer completely changes how we understand Cleopatra. Caesar did not conquer Egypt because Cleopatra made him understand something fundamental. Egypt only worked with her. Her legitimacy before the Egyptian people, who venerated her almost as a goddess, was the most valuable asset in the kingdom. Without Cleopatra, Egypt was a country in flames. She was not a war trophy. She was the price of peace. In the year 44 BC, Caesar was assassinated in the Roman Senate. Cleopatra lost at a stroke her protector, her ally, and the father of her son. She was 25 years old. Any other ruler would have panicked. She assessed the situation. Rome split into 2 sides: Octavian, Caesar's heir, and Mark Antony, his most loyal general. Cleopatra chose Mark Antony and used exactly the same formula again. Mark Antony had summoned her to Tarsus to justify herself for having supported his enemies during the Civil War. Cleopatra did not arrive as the accused. She arrived as a queen. She came on a barge with purple silk sails, silver oars, and a crew of boys dressed as cupids. Mark Antony was left alone on his judge's throne. She did not go to see him. She sent him a dinner invitation, and he went. What followed was not just a romance. It was the most audacious attempt to create a new world order since Alexander the Great. Cleopatra and Mark Antony wanted to found an Eastern empire that united Egypt, the Middle East, and the Eastern Mediterranean, a power that would compete with Rome from the other side of the sea. They had 3 children. He ceded Roman territories to her. She financed his military campaigns. Rome watched them with horror. Octavian, the future Augustus, whom you already met in last week's video, declared them enemies of the state. The naval battle of Actium was the decisive moment. Octavian's forces outnumbered those of Mark Antony and Cleopatra. In the middle of the battle, the Egyptian fleet withdrew. To this day, Historians debate whether it was cowardice, betrayal, or a tactical retreat that went wrong. What we know is that Mark Antony, seeing Cleopatra's sails sailing away, abandoned his army and followed her. It was the end. Octavian entered Alexandria. Mark Antony, believing Cleopatra had died, took his own life. Cleopatra received the news with him still alive in her arms. Octavian wanted to take her to Rome in chains as a war trophy, to display her in his triumphal procession before the Roman people. Cleopatra knew it and made her final decision. The official account says she died from the bite of a snake, a cobra, the divine symbol of the pharaohs, which she had placed inside a basket of figs. She was 39 years old. She was the last pharaoh of Egypt. With her death, 3,000 years of pharaonic civilization ended forever. Cleopatra has spent 2,000 years being reduced to an impossible love, to the men who loved her. But what history sometimes forgets is this: she governed Egypt for 21 years. She kept it independent while Rome devoured the known world. She built alliances where others would have fallen, and when she saw the game was lost, she chose how to end it. That is not a victim. That is someone who played better than anyone for longer than anyone. If this story has changed even a little the image you had of Cleopatra, share it. There are a lot of people who still believe the Hollywood version. Alexandria, August 30 BC. A man runs himself through with his own sword, not because he lost a battle, but because someone lied to him about the death of the woman he loved. That man was Rome's most feared general, Julius Caesar's right-hand man, the only rival Octavian couldn't defeat in open battle, and he died because of a lie. But to understand how he got here, we have to go back to the beginning, because the story of Mark Antony isn't a story of defeat. It's the story of a man who held all the power in the world in his hands and let it go twice. Mark Antony was born in 83 BC in Rome. His family was noble but impoverished. His father had died on campaign when he was a child. His mother remarried. Mark Antony grew up without money and without discipline. As a young man, he was exactly what Rome hated in an aristocrat: a drinker, a gambler, deeply in debt, a lover of the theater and gladiatorial combats. No one would bet on him, until he went to Greece to study rhetoric, and then to Syria, and then to Judea. And when he returned to Rome, he was a changed man. He was 20 years old and had learned to command men. On the battlefield, Mark Antony was a force of nature. Tall, physically imposing, with a voice that cut through the noise of an entire legion. The soldiers didn't obey him because of his rank. They followed him because they wanted to. That's something you can't buy or inherit. At 23, he was commanding cavalry in Judea. At 27, he was Caesar's most brilliant officer in Gaul. He crossed the Rhine twice. He pursued Vercingetorix. He held the Roman lines when everything was falling apart. Caesar saw him and knew exactly what he had: the best field general Rome had produced in a generation. He made him his second in command. Mark Antony was 30 years old, and the world was at his feet. His relationship with Caesar was something Rome didn't quite know how to categorize. It wasn't just military, it was personal. Caesar wrote him letters. He lent him money when his debts overwhelmed him. He gave him commands that other generals would have killed for. And Mark Antony repaid that trust with absolute, unwavering loyalty, devoid of political calculation. In the years of the Civil War, when Caesar crossed the Rubicon and Rome split in two, it was Mark Antony who held Rome together, who governed Italy, who maintained order when Caesar was at the front. He was the right hand of a god. On March 15th, 44, Julius Caesar was assassinated in the Roman Senate, 23 stab wounds. Mark Antony wasn't in the room. Someone had kept him waiting outside. When he arrived, Caesar was already dead. What he did next defines who he was. He didn't flee. He didn't negotiate with the assassins. He recovered Caesar's body, brought it to the Forum, and delivered the most famous speech in Roman history. He didn't attack the conspirators directly. He didn't need to. It was enough for him to remind the Roman people what they had lost. Rome burned that night, not because of torches, because of Mark Antony's words. But here's what history books don't ask. If Mark Antony was the most powerful man in Rome after Caesar's death, why didn't he seize power? The answer to that question explains exactly how he lost everything. Mark Antony didn't seize power in Rome because Rome was no longer the chessboard. The ancient world was bigger than that. While Octavian consolidated his power in the West, Mark Antony looked to the East. Egypt, Syria, Persia, the greatest storehouse of wealth that existed. And at the center of that world was Cleopatra. If you remember her from last week's video, you already know what she was. Not a queen, but the most brilliant negotiator of the ancient world. They met in Tarsus. She arrived disguised as Aphrodite in a boat with purple silk sails. Mark Antony, who had summoned an accused woman, was left alone on his judge's throne. She sent him a dinner invitation, and he went. What they built together wasn't a romance. It was the architecture of a new world order. Mark Antony granted Roman territories to Cleopatra. He recognized her children as legitimate heirs. He planned a campaign against Parthia that would have extended his power as far as India. They had 3 children. They lived in Alexandria like god kings. Rome regarded them with a mixture of horror and fascination. Octavian was everything Mark Antony was not. Cold, calculating, patient. He couldn't defeat him on the battlefield. So he attacked him where he was vulnerable, his image. He spread rumors throughout Rome that Mark Antony had become Oriental, that he danced drunkenly in the streets of Alexandria, that Cleopatra manipulated him like a puppet, that he had betrayed Rome for a foreign queen. Most of it was a lie. But in politics, the narrative matters more than the truth. And Mark Antony, from Alexandria, didn't know how to respond in time. 31 BC, Octavian declared war. Not on Mark Antony, on Cleopatra. It was a brilliant move. It transformed a Roman civil war into a patriotic war against a foreign power. They met at Actium, on the coast of Greece, in a naval battle that would decide the fate of the world. Mark Antony's forces were superior on land, but Cleopatra insisted on fighting at sea, and Mark Antony followed her. It was his first fatal mistake. In the middle of the battle, the Egyptian fleet withdrew. Mark Antony, seeing Cleopatra's sails receding, made the most incomprehensible decision of his life. He abandoned his army and followed her. His legions, the finest Rome had ever produced, waited for days for their general to return. When they realized he wasn't coming, they surrendered to Octavian. Mark Antony had won every battle of his life, and he lost the war the moment he chose a person over an army. Octavian entered Egypt. Mark Antony tried to gather forces. There was nothing to gather. Then came the lie. Someone informed him that Cleopatra had died. It wasn't true. Cleopatra was alive, locked in her mausoleum, negotiating with Octavian. But Mark Antony didn't know this. He stabbed himself with his own sword. He didn't die immediately. They carried him to the mausoleum where Cleopatra was. They hoisted his body up with ropes because he could no longer even climb stairs. He died in her arms. He was 53 years old. History remembers Mark Antony as the man who lost. But that's too simplistic. He was the general who never lost a battle that wasn't the result of a personal choice. He was the only man Octavian feared to face in open battle. He was the leader his soldiers followed, not out of obligation, but out of love. His two greatest defeats weren't military. They were human. He chose Cleopatra over Rome. And then he chose death over surrender. In a world where power is everything, Mark Antony twice chose to be a person before a politician. And that cost him everything. And perhaps that's why, 2,000 years later, we're still talking about him. With Mark Antony, the triangle that defined the end of the Roman Republic comes to an end. Caesar unwittingly killed it. Cleopatra tried to save her world. Mark Antony chose the wrong people at the wrong times. Imagine you're 18 years old. You're studying far from home when you receive a letter that will change the fate of the world. Your great-uncle, Julius Caesar, has been stabbed 23 times in the Senate, but the real bombshell comes later. Upon opening the will, you discover that Caesar has named you his primary heir. He hasn't just left you his immense fortune, he's left you his name. And with that name comes a death sentence. The most powerful men in Rome laugh. Mark Antony, the most feared general, calls this kid a boy who owes everything to a name. But that boy is about to orchestrate the greatest political swindle in the history of humankind. He won't just outlive all his enemies. He will become Caesar Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. This isn't a boring history lesson. It's a manual of survival, marketing, and terror. Welcome to Iconic Origins. When Octavian landed in Italy, his own family begged him to renounce his inheritance. They knew Mark Antony would crush him. But Octavian was different. He had fragile health, suffered from asthma and fevers, but his mind was an icy, calculating machine. He did something no one expected. He sold every property he owned, house by house, field by field. Why? To do something the Senate considered sacrilege: buy his own army. With the money in hand, he went to Julius Caesar's veterans and made them an offer they couldn't refuse. Within weeks, this 18-year-old student had 3,000 soldiers loyal only to him. But here's the twist. He didn't use them to attack. He used them to sit and negotiate with the lions. He deceived the Senate into believing he was the lesser evil compared to Mark Antony. He managed to secure legal military command while still practically a child. It was the first major move of a master of political chess. To win, Octavian had to embrace the monster. He allied himself with his rival, Mark Antony, and with Lepidus. They formed the Second Triumvirate. But peace came at a price Rome would never forget: the proscriptions. Imagine waking up one morning, going to the Forum, and seeing a list of names nailed to a column. If your name was there, you were a dead man. Anyone could cut off your head, take it to the leaders, and collect a reward. Octavian, the supposedly cultured and pious young man, signed the death warrants of more than 300 senators and 2,000 knights. He even allowed Cicero, the man who had helped him rise to power, to be executed, just to appease Mark Antony. Why such cruelty? Because Octavian didn't want to win a battle. He wanted to clear the board. He wanted that when the war was over, no one would have the authority to tell him no. The world was too small for two Caesars. Mark Antony went east, into Cleopatra's arms. Octavian stayed in Rome. And this is where we see the genius of marketing in action. He didn't attack Antony for power. He attacked him for treason. He convinced the people that Antony had become a puppet of a foreign queen who wanted to move the capital to Egypt. He transformed a civil war into a patriotic war. After the defeat and suicide of Antony and Cleopatra at Actium, Octavian was the master of the world. He had all the gold of Egypt and all the legions of Rome. He could have crowned himself king that very day, but he remembered what happened to his uncle Julius for doing so. In 27 BC, Octavian entered the Senate, and, in a speech that left everyone speechless, said, "I renounce all my powers. I return the Republic to the Senate." It was a trap. He knew the Senate was afraid of chaos. They begged him to stay. They gave him the name Augustus, the sacred. He accepted, pretending he was only the first citizen. But the reality was that, from that moment on, freedom in Rome had died. The empire was born. Augustus ruled for 40 years of absolute peace, the famous Pax Romana. Under his rule, Rome became the marble metropolis we admire today. But he never stopped acting. He always lived simply, always consulted the Senate, even if he had already made up his mind. On his deathbed, in 14 AD, he asked for a mirror. He combed his hair, straightened his drooping jaw, and called his friends. His last words were not about glory or empire. They were the confession of an artist. Have I played my part well in this comedy of life? If so, bid me farewell with applause. Caesar Augustus was not just a ruler. He was the origin of modern power. The man who proved that to control the world, you don't need a crown, you need a narrative. The story of Augustus is the origin of how an empire is built from nothing. If you want to learn more about iconic origins that changed the world, subscribe and turn on notifications. Do you think Augustus was a genius or a villain? Let me know in the comments.